I'll ask you about your book first. You've just written a book called Should the World Fear China? Why was this an important question for you to answer?
Well, actually, this is the first question asked to me by a German magazine called Die Zeit. I didn't expect that, and I was impressed with that because he just asked me, Colonel, tell me, should the world fear China, as the first question. So I was so impressed. So I decided to use this as a title of my book because I believe this question actually has epitomized what the world, especially the West, thinks about China. It's a kind of uncertainty or even mixed with some fear. So in Chinese Taoism, it might be interpreted as China's rise, fortune or misfortune.
And why do you think the West fears China?
Well, because they believe that the international order after the Second World War is a kind of liberal international order. But apparently China's rise is a kind of a challenge to this order. So I believe they feel uncomfortable. So they are not so sure whether a rising power like China with a different social system, different culture, or even different civilization might mean something different for the international system.
China has undertaken the most rapid military expansion of any country since World War II. Can you understand why that is a threat to a country like Australia?
No, I don't think I don't think you're right at all on this point, because I would argue in a different way that China's rise has been unprecedentedly peaceful. Actually, it's a miracle in human history.
Why does China need the largest navy in the world if its intention is peace?
Well, China's intention is not a secret, because we have made it quite clear that we want to build a world-class military. Being strong doesn't mean that you have to be a hegemon. And this is not the case. There is no proof that China is, becoming a hegemon.
How can we separate capability from intent when it comes to the PLA?
Yes, that is a good question, because in the West, I know how people stress on capabilities, because that is something that takes a long time to build, and intention could be changed overnight. But the best way to learn about PLA or China's behavior is to look into the history of China. You see, after founding of People's Republic of China, basically we would have a war every 10 years, with some other countries until 1979, when we had a war with Vietnam. And then China started to reform and open up. It is from then on that China becomes more and more open. And this opening up to embrace the whole world actually didn't make China more belligerent. Actually, it has made China more peaceful. And it makes China looking very much like any part or any countries in the rest of the world.
We see the PLA rehearsing a blockade or invasion of Taiwan. That doesn't look peaceful.
Well, that certainly is a more complicated story, because not only China, but more than 180 countries who have diplomatic relationship with China would consider Taiwan to be part of China. So this is not a kind of military exercise of one country against another. So Taiwan is part of China. And doing military exercises is intended to deter possible secessionism of Taiwan. So it does not mean that we're going to use force immediately or overnight against the Taiwanese people.
So is it a fair assessment? Is China planning an attack or invasion of Taiwan?
Yeah, well, China's use of force is not entirely impossible. Actually, we have made clear that there are three conditions for us to use non-peaceful means. That is, if Taiwan declared independence, which doesn't seem possible, Taiwanese authority would not be so stupid. The second situation is foreign forces trying to separate Taiwan from mainland China. And I doubt which foreign force is so strong that it can actually separate Taiwan from mainland China. Only the third condition really matters. That is, if the Chinese government feels that the prospect for peaceful reunification is exhausted forever. So these are the three conditions that are clearly written in China's law of anti-secession. So I believe, for us to have peaceful reunification between mainland China and Taiwan, therefore, the most important thing is that the world need to let the Chinese government believe that a peaceful reunification is still possible. So long as it is still possible, we will not resort to use of force. And luckily, we're still talking about peaceful reunification. China has not lost patience until this moment.
Some military analysts believe that in the PLA's rush to upsize and modernise the military, they have missed some crucial training and wouldn't in fact be ready for a conflict. What's your response to that?
Well, yes, of course, the military is born to prepare for the worst scenario for any conflict or wars. Of course, they would do all kinds of trainings, right? And right now, because the PLA is one of the is actually the largest armed forces in the world, and I believe China, probably in many countries' eyes, is already a superpower. So therefore, it is absolutely legitimate for us to do all kinds of exercises, for all kinds of scenarios.
It sounds like you're saying the PLA would use force to facilitate peaceful reunification. Isn't that a contradiction?
No, I wasn't talking about that. I mean, force is the last resort. And right now, we believe there is still hope for peaceful reunification. But according to China's anti-secession law, there are certain conditions, actually 3 conditions, for us to resort to non-peaceful means, which I hope will never happen. So, simply put, China is still having patience, and China is still hoping for peaceful reunification.
There are some military analysts who believe in the PLA's rush to modernise and upsize, they've missed some crucial training and may not in fact be ready for a conflict. What's your response to that?
Well, you see, the latest conflict between India and Pakistan tells about the reliability and lethality of Chinese weapon system, right? And the Chinese defense industry is progressing by leaps and bounds because China is the largest industrial nation. So with better weaponry and equipment, PLA is also doing all kinds of exercises. So how can you argue that PLA cannot fight?
When the PLA sends 76 aircraft, dozens of warships, practices hitting key ports and energy infrastructure in Taiwan, what message is that sending to the Indo-Pacific, to other nations?
Well, that is for other nations to think about. But I think, for me, Taiwan is part of China, and this is recognized by all the countries you have mentioned. So military exercises is a kind of practice, and we need to practice to make sure that when it is needed, we can definitely fulfill our mission.
We've just spent some time in the Pacific in Tonga, which has a $190 million debt to Beijing, which it really can't pay back. Is China exercising debt trap diplomacy to control Tonga and other developing countries?
Well, I'm alarmed by the figure you mentioned because this cannot be a kind of Chinese trap. Some people argue, almost like you, that China's Belt and Road Initiative is a trap, so on and so forth. But the International Monetary Fund say no, it is not like that. Basically, a man or a country can lie, but you won't lie after you make after you made billions of dollars investment, right? So these are solid investment. So this actually is a question for the Tonga government, yeah. So why can't they pay back? Did they borrow too much? So it's not that we want to give them a lot of debt, because for this debt to appear, we have to make a huge investment there. Actually, it's a waste of our money.
There are substantial gifts and grants, a new sports stadium, various infrastructure. What does China stand to gain from giving those things to Tonga?
Well, if I just put what you said against the background of the whole Belt and Road Initiative, which is full of these kind of things you have mentioned, I believe this actually raises questions. Why do all these countries need all this? because China's own best experience since reform and opening up is that to become rich, you got to have good roads first. So that is a lesson learned by Chinese themselves. So that means infrastructure is critical for countries' development. And for these poor countries along the Belt and Road, they just cannot afford to have a good road and good infrastructure. So therefore, they need a country like China to help to invest. These things won't be done by any Western countries who would have a lot of conditions, to lend money and so on and so forth. It is from such a developing country like China, for the first time, these countries would have hope to develop their own infrastructure. Let me just give you the example of Gwadar Port in Pakistan. Without China's Belt and Road Initiative, I don't believe Pakistan would have a single chance of reviving a port like Gwadar.
The Belt and Road Initiative then really is potentially changing the global political and economic landscape.
I think so, but that is a secondary because the primary purpose is for economic interactions. But with an infrastructure building that is so huge or massive scale, it would create a political and geopolitical influence. But that is something that actually are spillovers of the economic projects.
Doesn't Beijing stand to gain power and influence from spending that money?
Of course, with this kind of spending, such kind of influence will come, but that is secondary. You just want to, invest for influence because you invest on something concrete. That is built with cement, probably. So with all this kind of roads being built, with the people having better infrastructure, people would think about China, how China has helped them, and with this kind of, ideas and expectations, China's influence, of course, will grow. It's a kind of a natural, result.
Are you saying there's no strings attached to China's money?
I don't think so. That probably is one of the strongest advantages between Chinese, credit and some credit from International Monetary Fund or World Bank or by some Western countries. I think we do not have strings attached. Yeah.
So China is purely being generous, being friendly.
It's not only a question of generosity because it's mutually beneficial. We make investment. And these people like your investment, and they're supposed to pay back, right? So it's not a charity.
Do you think the West has missed opportunities in some of those countries?
Of course, they have lost a lot of opportunities, but they simply cannot compete with China for a number of reasons. First of all, I think China's behavior is more state-sponsored. And for the Western country, normally such kind of projects are not state-sponsored. And besides, China's capabilities in infrastructure buildings are next to none. So therefore, China can make use of these capabilities to build better roads and even railways, so on and so forth. If you come to China to look at China's infrastructure, you would understand why China can export these kind of things.
A lot of that is economic, but isn't the end game for Beijing security agreements, military alliances?
Not at all. For example, with all these Chinese projects, China, of course, will become influential, right? That is for sure. But that does not mean that you are going to establish a sphere influence. Then you would seek alliance. Then you would have allies. Then you behave like the United States. And having allies altogether sometimes sounds good, but actually it's a difficult job. Herding the cats is never easy. So why should China bother with establishing spheres of influence if it is already influential around the world?
So China doesn't need those smaller allies?
I don't think China needs any allies, because if you look at China's periphery, for example, Southeast Asia is often described as China's backyard. How can it be China's backyard? China, in Southeast Asia, there are American allies. There are other claimants to South China Sea. So how can you say, with confidence that this is your area? And then look at the Northeast Asia, Even DPRK won't listen to China when it comes to nuclear issues. So how can you have a sphere influence? Because you don't have sphere influence, and because there is no need for you to establish that, then you do not have to shoulder such a burden. Sphere influence is not something that it looks good on the table. Yeah, it's a kind of old concept, right? So China should not want that. Yeah, China should do things like a Belt and Road Initiative, help other people with infrastructure, do business. Yeah, that is the future for China.
The US has retreated somewhat in the Pacific, in the Indo-Pacific. Has that been a gift to China?
Well, I don't believe that the United States has really retreated from Indo-Pacific. I believe the United States has actually retreated from the whole world. So actually, they try to become more focused. The stress on the Indo-Pacific region means that they're actually retreating from the whole world, because this Indo-Pacific region is the most dynamic region in the world. Yeah, the United States also want to catch the train that is moving fast. So I don't believe they are just retreating from Indo-Pacific. They're not withdrawing troops from South Korea, from Japan. They're trying to strengthen, relationship with Australia, with other countries through AUKUS. Yeah, which doesn't seem to be very successful.
What is the view inside China of the AUKUS agreement?
Well, I think AUKUS is against China, yeah, and Quad is because of China. This is the most simple way I can put. But whether it is useful or not, I have strong doubts about it. The Americans don't even have enough submarines themselves. So how long could they provide you submarines?
Our military chiefs are very confident that we have a strong and capable navy and military, and we also have really strong and capable cooperation with allies, Indonesia, Japan, India, etc., US. I'm interested, what is the perception inside China? Does it feel like, China is here on its own and then it's the rest of the West against you?
No, I don't think the whole West is united against China. It is just simply impossible. Right now, no countries are stupid. Yeah, it's not that they are taking sides with either China or the United States. Yeah, these countries, including your country, is taking sides with the issues. On this issue, I'm with China. On that issue, I'm with the United States. So you never know which side is really with, right? And that is a smart strategy. Yeah. So I don't think the whole West is against China, not at all.
Do you think everyone's playing their own game?
Yeah, I think so, because of their own national interests.
Is China attempting to reshape the world order?
Well, I think China could really change a lot of the international order, but to make the world a safer place, if not a better place. Why is that? Because the international order is something that is really, really difficult for us to discuss because it's very much abstract, right? But simply put, the international order is never a liberal international order, because the international order is a hybridization of everything together. It would include a country's culture, yeah, national identity, social system, yeah, and even different civilizations. So this is how the world look like. So it's like a garden full of different flowers and animals. So if you believe that this world is best, like a garden, yeah, then you have to think, you have to coexist with others. Then you would not be narcissistic. You would not consider you are dispensable. You would not consider you are sitting upon the hill. Yeah? So that is the right approach. So China just consider China is part of the world, and China has benefited a lot in the last 40 years from opening up, from learning from the West, from sending hundreds of thousands of students to the West. Yeah, you have a lot of good things for us to learn, and even including market economy. That is something we have learned from the West. So how can we be, a revisionist? So China has benefited from the international order.
How would you describe China's relationship with Australia?
I think it is improving. Yeah, actually, historically speaking, China-Australia relationship has always, been good until in recent years. I think that some of the problems come from the United States because they just want you to pick sides. Yeah, it's not your problem, but so you have to pick sides, and then of course you would pick the United States because you're Anglo-Saxons. Uh, Unfortunately, you're Anglo-Saxons, like it or not. So we understand, how you make such a choice, but it does not justify your own choice. You see, your location, is not there, in Western Europe, and your country of a multicultural, or multi-ethnicity, and so one third of your export, goes to China. So your life have a lot to do with the life of Chinese people. And we are so far away from each other. So how come that China would become a threat to Australia? But what we are saying is that Australia sometimes would make some provocative remarks, and you would send ships and aircraft to come to South China Sea, or even sailing through Taiwan Strait, chanting this kind of freedom of navigation slogans.
In February, China sent 3 warships into Australian waters, unannounced. They circumnavigated Australia, then they stopped and did live firing drills in the Tasman Sea. Would you not describe that as an aggressive activity, a show of force?
I'm glad you mentioned this because actually this kind of sailing by Chinese Navy would provide you a chance of soul-searching of what you have done to China. Yeah, if that makes you to think, I think that is good for you.
So was that retaliation?
Well, I think it's not a kind of retaliation, but it shows you, first of all, if you are talking about a law, Chinese ships also have rights to do freedom of navigation. But if you do not like this concept, then think of what you have done to China. Yeah, and then think about what China has done to you. This is fair.
It's not very friendly, is it, to show up and do live fire exercises? Why wouldn't China warn us?
Well, is it friendly that you have sent aircraft and ships so close to China, to make all these provocations? Who did it first? Do not do unto others what you would not do to yourself, right? But historically speaking, you are always fighting other people's war, right? Be it in Gallipoli, be it in Afghanistan, or even during the Second World War, you're always fighting other people's wars. Why should you always fight other people? Why would you always follow other people's footprint?
So is this a warning from China? Stay out of the South China Sea, stay out of what we're doing with Taiwan?
I don't think that is the message, because for ships, to sail in South China Sea, for aircraft to fly, over South China Sea, internationally speaking, it is perfectly all right so long as you abide by international law, which actually is suitable for both of us. Yeah, but do not try to challenge others by picking some of these things out of it and make your own explanation. Yeah, China is not against the freedom of navigation. Yeah, because in the South China Sea, actually most of the ships are Chinese ships. And China, as the largest industrial nation on earth, as the largest exporter in the world, and as the second largest importer in the world, definitely needs, freedom of navigation. So China is not against all this. But what has an Australian naval vessel to do with the Taiwan Strait? Is it a must for you to sail over there to deliver your export to China? What is the purpose of you sailing through Taiwan Strait and chanting loudly about freedom of navigation?
You're describing a very hostile situation. Are we already at war?
No, I don't think we are in a hostile situation, because there is nothing actually inevitable between China and Australia. It is actually Australia who provoked China on different occasions for different reasons. Yeah, China is just making its own response. So if you come to a stop, on all those kind of things, I think things will come down.
How can China and Australia work together in the Pacific, in the Indo-Pacific, in the South China Sea, when there are such competing interests?
Well, I don't think our interests are competing. Definitely, a peaceful environment is good for both of us, and because we are so far away from each other. But of course, there are times when our ships probably meet one another, right? But even if when we meet one another, there are international standards for how they two have to cooperate. That is good airmanship and good seamanship. These are not secrets. So if they just follow these rules and do not try to challenge the other side, I think things will be all right.
So to clarify, do you think China's message is, Australia, if you keep your aircraft and your warships, your military out of the areas that China wants to control, everything will be friendly?
No, I don't think that is the message, because you are entitled, according to international law, to have freedom of navigation and overflight. This is everybody's right. You can do that, right? But if you just sail over there chanting freedom of navigation as if the other side is not observing the rules, and to make your own behavior look provocative, this surely would invite a response, which is not good for you. This is what I'm saying.
Both sides are undoubtedly preparing for war, aren't they?
You mean China and Australia? No, I don't think so. Yeah.
You don't think so?
No, not at all. I don't believe there is a chance, I don't believe there is a serious chance for us to come into a conflict. Just imagine, okay, where could we have a war with one another? Yeah, well, there is no reason for us to sail into your waters to launch attack on Australia. For what, right? But it often turned out that you are sailing your ships and aircraft into Taiwan Strait and into South China Sea. So if there is a war, that means it occurs near China's doorstep. So then you would know who is provocative, right?
Yeah, I see what you're saying. So any conflict in your mind would undoubtedly be around reunification with Taiwan and Australia and the US getting involved.
Well, I think it is very much up to you to decide whether you would gang up with the United States in a possible conflict in Taiwan Strait or in South China Sea. It's up to you to decide, yeah? So I don't believe that we're sailing into your water to suddenly launch attack on Australia.
If you look at both countries' militaries and, the allies that we have and the expansion of the PLA, hypothetically, if that conflict that we've been discussing were to eventuate, who would win?
You would lose, definitely. You don't have enough aircraft, you don't have enough ships, and our military is growing by leaps and bounds, and we are fighting our home turf, and we are determined to safeguard China's sovereignty. On that, you can imagine our soldiers would be brave, and our weapons would be lethal.
Let's hope it doesn't come to that.
Hopefully, yeah.